I recorded a conversation with Philipp Jordan yesterday. Phil's an instructor at Oregon State Uni and he teaches design and research to computer scientists. Phil's done some research into the relationship between science fiction and innovation in real life, and that's why I reached out to see if he'd like to chat. I wanted to learn about his brief transition from academic research into the corporate world too. So here's our conversation.
So my primary research track tries to understand or investigate how science fiction, which can be literary science fiction, audiovisual science fiction, right? Movies, shows, comics, could also in theory be games, right? Interactive stuff, relates to lesser or larger degree to computer science, research and education. So I try to find basically where two bipolar fields connect, right? Mm-hmm. So what computer scientists probably would say, like, I've been seeing like Star Trek and there's time travel, or the transporter, and that's a really nice thing, but it's never going to work in real life. And visionaries in science fiction probably have tried to use everyday technologies. If we think of the mobile phone, which was ultimately depicted in Star Trek, the original series, as the communicator. And they take these current ideas and just push them a little bit more far ahead and depict them on the screen. So I thought there might be somewhere there like a collision or a relationship or a link. And that was where I based my research on overall.
Okay, so it's the intersection between innovation in real life and the medium of science fiction for exploring technologies and how they could evolve.
Yeah, it can be innovation. It can also be ethical dilemmas and philosophical questions, which are, in my opinion, a huge part in science fiction. If you think of dystopias, for example, and I think the current situation in the world is a prime example with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. And at times, I don't know the specific situation in Australia, but I know other examples where you are mandated to use a tracking app for your cell phone, which, on one side probably makes sense from a public health perspective, but on the other side, you have then these concerns about privacy, right? And security versus privacy was always a fascinating and well-depicted topic in science fiction, 1984, for example. So yeah, there is like an innovation, in my opinion, inspiration, and there is also like some kind of like a depiction of how things could turn worse, which I think is very valuable in science fiction.
Okay, what are some of the examples of the things that you've seen that were first explored in science fiction and then where you were grounded in reality with the technology that we have or came to fruition in real life?
So, I mean, this is my personal experience you're like inquiring me about. And when I was young, so to speak, I remember I liked to watch a lot of Star Trek, The Next Generation. So I think I was a Trekkie, so to speak, and I wasn't that interested in Star Wars. And if you would know Star Trek, The Next Generation, it's one of the biggest tech utopias you can think of. So people are more or less always productive, always happy, always healthy. Technology is invisible. It's everywhere, but it's invisible. The doors open perfectly when you walk through. The computer is always there, but never invasive. And it depicts a wide range of interfaces, devices, for example, like a non-invasive medical diagnosis, which was called in that show the medical tricorder, which inspired a real development of medical tricorder a couple of years back. So I watched that show a lot, and I remember I was thinking, hey, that's pretty cool stuff. like on screen there, and I was just wondering if that could be possible, or if such a device could become reality at some point in time. And if I may add another personal flavor to that, I remember then a few years later, I watched Star Trek, the old series, which was actually earlier in time, right? With William Shatner, James T. Kirk, Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, I think. And if you know that original Star Trek, it's the total opposite. It's like the crew of like Star Trek or James T. Kirk commonly solves problems with the fists and not diplomacy. There's commonly like some kind of romantic story happening and some little drama, and it's all just like a more rough and like blunt, I would say. And it's just like, it shows really like how basically in Star Trek, the Next Generation, the society developed more towards, you know, this techno-utopia in comparison to the original series. So these were like a couple of the inspiring movies and shows I watched. So I also want to add that there is a differentiation to be made, which I think you also have to consider in your questions. If we talk about the type of science fiction, right? So there's literary science fiction. So we both read like, you know, 20,000 Miles Under the Sea. And then we both are asked to draw the submarine of Jules Verne. And it's going to look, your submarine is going to look very different than mine. But we both watch probably Back into the Future. And we know exactly more or less, you know, the DeLorean, how it looks, the type. We have an impression imprinted on our minds, a bias from the movie. And I did like enjoy a lot of movies and shows because they are less creative, right? The director shows you how things could be, but by doing so, it's actually a quite nice, fiction, almost like a design fiction scenario. Like, we have this technology and this framework and these people and these actors, and this is how this would work out potentially.
Yeah, I was going to get to the question of, like we spoke at the beginning there around like the intersection of technology in real life and science fiction. And I was wondering, do these two camps speak? And is there an overt relationship between the two? Or is it just one of inspiration that happens kind of independently? But what you've just described there is that if you're developing a technology for a science fiction movie, they must have to speak with technical advisors to try and get some amount of accuracy.
Yeah, I mean, so there are like individual endeavors, I would call it, or fragmented efforts, where like, for example, movie directors deliberately collaborate or recruit scientists for reasons of like veracity and technological realism in the movie or show they are seeking to produce. So the most prominent example is the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which is based in LA. And I actually went there to interview the people who run this exchange. And they have a website, you can check it out, but I think in brief, they are basically the Tinder or the matchmakers of scientists from like a variety of disciplines and producers or movie makers. So let's say you make a movie which takes place in space, so it's about like, colonizing the moon. You probably want to have like, a space engineer, a space scientist, or planetary scientists, etc. Then maybe you want to make a movie about, natural disasters. You want to have experts from that area, so and so on and forth. So I was there and I did run an interview, very much like this, just in person, because things were different back then, obviously. And I think they have run thousands of matches. So they had a huge database. And for example, I or you as well, anybody could sign up as a consultant. So you could create a profile and you could state your level of expertise or your area or domain of research. And then you could potentially be tagged by a producer for your input, And this input could be just like one quick interview. It could go as far, I've been told, as being recruited to be a technical advisor for the movie, which also then can be financially compensated, etc.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can see why it'd be so valuable for a movie maker to have an idea for a technology and need some advice. I wonder if it ever works the other way around, where you have a computer scientist that has a technology that they want someone to explore or a medium to explore it.
That's an excellent question. Yeah. And I would guess that it doesn't happen often. On the other side, in my research, I found that computer scientists often themselves become, to some degree, these personas, the science fiction nerds who basically, in rare instances, I have found examples where these researchers accredit their technology or device being inspired by science fiction explicitly.
Mm-hmm.
So one example, there's a Disney movie. It's an animated movie. You might know it or not. It's called Big Hero 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bunch of robots. And I think there's a big robot. Is it called Baymax? I believe so.
It sounds about right. The big inflatable glowing.
Yeah, it's a big guy. He's like white, I think, and has some black or some gray. And he's kind of like cute and adorable, even though, he doesn't have like a lot of expressions. And there's I think a 2018 paper, to give you one example on this, where researchers created Puffy. They called their robot Puffy. It was an inflatable robot. It could, via some light, express some emotions. So there was light which could fade from red to green, could like move a little bit. And it was supposed to be used in instances, for example, some kind of like situations where you work with children with, I think, neurodevelopmental disorders. And I read this paper, and Puffy, their robot, there's even a video, it looks like Baymax. One-on-one, like carbon copy. And they also accredit basically that clearly that embodiment of Puffy was inspired from Baymax, from
Mm-hmm.
Big Hero 6. And I want to just give you one more nugget on this. So what I found in this example, and I think this is relevant to many examples to answer your question, if it goes the other way around, if the scientists, go to the science fiction writer, for example, and ask for advice or input, I found that because what I did mostly, I did analyze scientific publications. So I didn't talk to people. I looked at their research outputs, at their writings, and tried to find there the evidence. My collaborators met the writers of that paper at the conference, of that paper about their robot. And when my collaborators, actually Australian folks, conversed with the writers of the papers, of that paper, and the developers of that robot, they said basically, verbally, yeah, we saw the movie, and we thought this is the perfect robot to work with these kind of children. But they never wrote it like that. They wrote in the paper, there was maybe a one-liner somewhere which accredits that the visual appearance of their robot has. So there's a certain understatement being made, but I think the impact or the effect is much larger.
Do you know where in the process they took that inspiration? Like, did they see the robot and then think of a purpose for it in real life? Or did they have a problem that they needed to solve and use this as inspiration?
Yeah. Yet again, great question. I have no answer to that one, but I can give you a different example which answers that question. It's an example I read about in a book, which is called Make It So. It's a 2012 book, and it's basically like, it's a compendium of like interfaces, HCI, interactions, gestures, etc., which are found in a variety of science fiction movies and shows. And part of that is an example which introduces, forgive me, I forgot, but it's either X-Men 1 or X-Men 2, the movie. And within that movie, there is, toward the end, the big battle. You know, the X-Men heroes have to protect New York City or something. And they have a round table in the movie. And imagine it's like the table is made up of like thousands of like 3D needles. So it can, like, you know, it shows like it builds up and it shows the skyline. And then it shows like the approach and what would happen if the rocket would like hit the skyline, and it changes the terrain. So the example I read about was, there was an engineer who worked like, I think, or was affiliated with the DOD in the US Department of Defense, and he went with his nephew or something in the movie to watch X-Men. And then he saw that movie and he saw that scene. And then afterwards, he proposed to create like a so-called needle table. And that table was supposedly being developed and used to send map and cartographic information to soldiers in the Middle East. So they could basically like project on a 3D landscape, a terrain, to kind of scope out their mission, right? So it wasn't just a flat map, it was actually a 3D map. And the map, because it was that device, that needle table, could transform, right, based on any data you were like feeding into it. So that's one example. I don't know how the inventor of the cell phone, the wireless phone, in the 70s, Martin Cooper, when he precisely was inspired or how, but the quote is that, yeah, he saw Star Trek and he saw the Communicator and he was like stunned and thought, why don't we have something like that? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's an interesting question, absolutely.
Yeah. So do you think that, because what we're really talking about is the process of speculation and imagining possibilities, and I guess sci-fi is just the ideal medium for that. What I've been trying to reconcile is, how can you create the space to speculate on this level within a corporate environment? And this has been really tricky, but I feel like there is a way of doing it, whether it's ideation or analogous exploration. Have you had any experiences with that?
Yeah, it is difficult. I have little personal experiences in successfully, let's say, introducing any kind of sci-fi related, I'm going to call it stuff, the working term, into a corporate environment. And yeah, I think it's extremely challenging. I could see, so I was thinking about this earlier today, and I could see certain companies and certain contexts where it is possible. So one good example is Google. Google has a subdivision, it's called Google X. And they are supposedly developing the moonshots, the big ideas. So they have Project Loon, which is like, I think, some kind of like weather balloons. They have like Project Wing, which I think is like drone delivery, etc., which has been depicted here and there in science fiction, drones, right, autonomous delivery, etc. So I think, yeah, it needs a certain size, it needs a certain support from the top level to, you know, kind of like say, let's explore, let's burn some money to explore a crazy idea. And that, yeah, you can consider yourself fortunate if you're in such an environment.
Yeah, I think so. I think the issue, I mean, that a lot of us will face is that it's hard to pitch for resources to do something where you don't know what the output is going to be, it's much easier to dedicate resources to something that you can conceptualize very quickly and know the outcome.
There's like design fiction, right, as a means to maybe create something quick and elicit responses can have value in that regard. So I could see examples where, you just like, build a prototype which doesn't function, you present it, and you gather, for example, some empirical feedback from a focus group, right? If that would be, what would you say? So there is a possibility to do so, but again, in my limited experience, I have to say, corporate only thinks, how the saying goes, till the next quarter or the next year, right?
Yeah.
Rarely they think 5, 10, 15 years ahead.
Yeah.
At least that's my opinion on the topic.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is tricky. I like to think that I will find a use for it in one way or another, even if it's just a small part in ideation to just shake up ideas and inspire some creativity. But we'll see how I get on with that. But you have thought about introducing it into educational curriculums before. That's right. And how do you think that might fit in, and what purpose would it serve? How would it help the students?
So the primary benefit, in my opinion, of science fiction, and this includes the written, the audiovisual, so to speak, the shows, the movies, the comics, and I would argue also like the interactive to some degree, the video games, etc., is the ethical component, which is very important in computer science and the concurrent hot topics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and this then has, results which are algorithmic discrimination, AI supported hiring, things like that. So I think there science fiction has actually incredible value, because it will show the upcoming generation of computer scientists, and even like the corporate workforce, the potential consequences of what they are doing. And I think this will like grow more and more in the upcoming years. Yeah. Because I personally, my opinion on the topic is, I'm highly concerned about a lot of developments personally, and I'm not supportive of the introduction of pervasive AI and machine learning in all kinds of contexts. So there is this pushback of this technological determinism, right? We just use AI and computers for everything, and they're going to just make our lives easier, right? It's just going to be, but there might be a point in time where the social structures, will push back because they realize, wait, is our life actually better? Like we stare now 20 hours a day on some kind of screen, the phone screen, the computer screen, the TV screen. So is that actually, how we want to be as a society?
Yeah.
If I may say one more thing, it's a historical example, but it speaks to it. I read about it a while ago. Television. It's the perfect example. I believe it was supposed to transform education and bring knowledge into every living room, right? And if you think about what television ultimately became, it is, just the mere opposite, right? It is binge watching stuff, being on the couch, stereotypically, right? Eating chips, being lazy. It didn't become this kind of interactive Wikipedia, so to speak, which makes your life better. It's more like a time sink for many.
It could be, it has the potential to be. It's more on the user, isn't it? And what they would like to use it for. And I think we always gravitate towards what's easiest and most comfortable. And that's what we want technology to help us achieve as well, is just more comfort and more ease. I think I'm already at the point where I'm like, some things are just too easy. I'd like them to be a little bit harder. You know, like I'm starting to think more around minimalism and just kind of having more time and space for myself and less possessions, and a more disciplined diet, because I like to have control over something rather than just indulging every day. So I guess I'm kind of reacting against that.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably this kind of like, you know, weighing of the benefits, versus like the drawbacks. And I think the benefits were massive at the beginning, when like, you know, the World Wide Web was introduced and everybody got connected, right? Everything became so easy. You could talk to anybody at all times across the globe. Amazing. But I think the scales are slowly changing back. Personally, what you were referring to is this fight for your attention, right? So everything is like buzzing or making a noise or email here and there. And everybody now has 2 or 3 screens, right? And you have to like, really segment your attention capacity to kind of just keep up with things. So you were referring to minimalism and just like reducing noise, basically. So there's this reckoning, and unfortunately, a lot of the companies, the producers, either, you know, in the social media space or in TV, of course, like try to grab that attention, right? Because it creates revenue. So maybe like, you're right, it's our responsibility to manage our media consumption or our time, but certainly it is much harder today to get a piece of unbiased news online than it was maybe 10 years ago. So you can only be a person responsible to a certain degree, which is based, you know, on your knowledge and experience. That doesn't mean, you know, if you don't know how to make informed decisions, you're like a bad person or you're stupid. That's not the point at all. But it's more like, it's become increasingly difficult to make the right choices for yourself, or to just evaluate things online.
It's true, we are vulnerable, and it is easy to take advantage of what we know about psychology to influence people. I wonder if profit wasn't the goal, would our application of technology be different? And how would our lives be different? Because it seems to me that it is advancement for the sake of advancement, because advancement brings more profit. Have you ever seen any speculations on that, or any science fiction that deals with that kind of a topic?
Yeah, just another great question. So I believe, so the example I brought at the very beginning about Star Trek: The Next Generation comes to mind, because their backdrop was how this works out, right? So some science fiction is grounded in realism. The Martian, you know, that movie was quite realistic, allegedly, in terms of how they rebuilt the NASA command center and how like Matt Damon on Mars was trying to survive. And there's like, you know, other science fiction which is completely speculative and unrealistic. And Star Trek was maybe somewhere there in the middle. Some technology has been rolled out. In fact, others is impossible. But they created this kind of like backdrop that the whole society was working because they found an infinite energy source. So I don't know if that's possible, but that erased the need for competition and capitalism, and allowed basically anybody to become his or her, again, utopia, best self, or pursue whatever you thought made sense for you at the time. So you wanted to be a piano player, or like an artist. You could do that. because there was an abundance of resources, so to speak. You didn't have to pay rent, you didn't have to pay for a medical examination, etc. It's the only example which comes to mind where they justified how such a system could work by this, like, endless energy source. Was it fusion? I don't know. I wouldn't know an example in real life. It's unfortunately a capitalistic driven society, and yeah.
I think that's a great example. I don't think I've seen many examples of utopias that aren't just a dystopia in disguise.
I mean, we are like leaning far out of the window here, but I could think of, there are like a few selected native tribes in the world who have not been tarnished yet by a civilization. So I know there's one island somewhere like in Southeast Asia, and they are quite isolated, and they are also quite hostile toward, like, intruders, so to speak. So people have died who tried to, missionaries, 2016 an American went. So I'm sure they have some bartering system as well, right? Kind of like, some materialistic values, so to speak. But I think that maybe such tribes or native populations, do they, like, work on the premise of, like, capitalism and just, accumulating more and more wealth? I think it's maybe more the principle of sustainability, which I also, don't see at scale in the world. It's more like of a branding thing, like we also use 0.1% for sustainability efforts of our profits somewhere in the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think that, I think that when your goal as a society is survival and meeting your basic needs, I think you're kept busy and you're probably fulfilled by fulfilling those needs in a cycle. And then you come to recognize that the environment that you live in is important to, look after and ensure a sustainable way of life. But now we're so far detached from that. I wonder if, like, that need to forage and store is being met through other means, money.
I mean, going a little bit back in the discussion to the example with the limited attention span and being overwhelmed by technology. I was teaching a while ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, a class on ethics, social media, and there was an extra credit assignment, so students didn't have to do it, right? But some of them had to do it because they wanted to improve their grade, and I called it net moratorium.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm going to repeat it. I call it the internet moratorium. So for 24 hours, I don't think it was 48, they were supposed to not use any kind of, like, wireless connectable device. They couldn't, like, surf the internet, obviously, on their phones, on a computer. They were allowed to use a landline phone. They, I'm not sure if I allowed credit cards or if they had to pay in cash. I forget. But it was severely restricted. Some students did it, and as part of the extra credit assignments, they had to report their experiences to the class. And it was interesting how deeply interwoven their lives were with, social media and overall a web online digital presence. They said, like, people got concerned, and actually called them on a real landline number because they couldn't reach them on Facebook or WhatsApp. They also said they didn't know what to do with their time. They said, like, they felt, empty, they felt disconnected. So it was just interesting. And there's, of course, from my, I have my personal opinion, which I voice strongly here, but that's my personal opinion. Certainly, I could see a generational difference between me and my students in that regard. I could never understand this. for me, it was clear that if the internet fails, probably a lot of them, won't know, what to do, or they will be like maybe inept to, well, I'm going to say it a little bit provocative, but to cook like a meal because they cannot look up the recipe online. It's not going to work out.
It's going that way, isn't it? It's getting to that point. I've had the issue where I've been in new cities and I've been navigating around and I'm using maps, and I got my head down so much just looking at the map that it takes me so long to actually learn the layout of a city because I've never actually been lost there before and had to find my way back, or I've never actually had to look at the street signs. I just follow the arrow.
It's another interesting point about urban planning, so to speak. And if you think of McDonald's, the golden M, the sign, what is it, right? It is a visual indicator that there is the food down there, and it leads you to the source. And I'm sure that these landmarks, were historically way more like known throughout society. But right now, basically, we outsource this knowledge to Google Maps or Waze or whatever, and we just follow the blue line. Yeah. Or we say like too much red on the blue line, take the better blue line. But once, you might have driven the same route multiple times, but once maybe your navigation system fails, even though you wrote this route for like 6, 10, 20, 40 times, you might not know how to drive it actually, because you never paid attention on how to do it. You just like relied on the technology to solve that problem for you. It can become concerning, in my opinion, at some point.
Yeah, I think that one brings us back then to, is the technology good and is it useful, or is it just easier? And which is better?
So there is there are these two strands in science technology studies, which are really like two parties, like the Democrats versus the Republicans in the United States. They're like the technological determinists. They say like technology dictates our behavior. It's inevitable, we just have to accept it. It will eventually overpower us. And I'm not talking about the singularity and killer robots, but basically we can't push back smartphones. They are just out there. And they're like, there's this other strand which argues for the social construction of technology or the social shaping. And then there is like a spectrum between these two strands or poles. And the social constructionists, they kind of argue that, well, ultimately, it's us, the people, who decide how a technology, will look like, how it will affect us, how it will be rolled out, or how it will be changed. And I think this spectrum or framework kind of applies to the current situation. And I think it gravitates personally a little bit away from this technological determinism. That technology is just great, it makes our hiring easier, it makes our processes better, it makes us more money, right, with just pushing one button, toward a little bit more of maybe the news is really biased, maybe we're talking to a lot of robots and not real people on Facebook. Oh, nobody expected that. Maybe we need to intervene there a little bit. And it becomes a little bit stronger on the social shaping of technology side.
Yeah, okay. So it's like in the beginning, we don't really know the way that technology is going to go. So we just set some things up, let them run. And then there's a point where you might need to interject, observe, guide, develop some principles.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's accurate what you said. Technology, it's not a point in time vacuum, right? I mean, see how television has changed, right? From 8 p.m. news to on demand, right? The model completely changed over 6 decades. And now the changes are just like, not coming maybe within a generation, like, massive changes coming within 10 years or so, which I think also then speaks to this being overwhelmed and just having limited capacity. Yeah, we are also at the point, I think, many like scientists say that. So there's, for example, this movement, you might have heard of it. It's called the Center for Humane Technology. They're like in the Silicon Valley. So there are a bunch of Silicon Valley like thought leaders who worked at the big tech companies. Kind of like the effort is spearheaded by a guy who's called, I think, Tristan Harris. And he was I didn't even know that exists, Jack. He was a design ethicist at Google. And he has, this whole series of talks, TED Talks. It's widely known now, where he talks about this fight for your attention. Or, like one quote is, the competitors of Netflix are Amazon Prime and Sleep. So something like that. And yeah, I think it's just, concerning overall how far it has become with regards to, how things have developed and how we have pushed technology clearly out of our, cognitive, limitations, right? Like, and that's something like we have to come to terms with, I guess. Yeah, and I don't know what's the next to come. Is it like, human-machine cooperation? Increased human-machine cooperation? Interesting times.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of unknown stuff to me that I haven't really given much thought, to be honest. I'd love to meet that design ethicist though and learn about the challenges that he has within his role in his industry. I imagine that's a tough one.
Yeah, I think you should look him up. I think the core of it all was something like, and I've also experienced this in my personal last engagement with corporate. It's like, you want the user to stay longer on your screen or in your app or check out faster or more, etc. That's the driving factor. I guess it's ultimately revenue, which then like results into more profit. And the way I understood him, as well as like all the others who support this Center for Humane Technology, is, I don't want to say they got sick of it, but they got so concerned that they stopped doing what they were doing to initiate a counter movement, basically, in the middle of the Silicon Valley. Yeah.
Wow. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the work that you do and the classes that you teach?
Oh, certainly. So I teach 2 classes. The first one is a usability engineering class, and it's, I would say, pretty straightforward, and also really like uses my experiences with my last job in the US at a design agency. So this is in the context of a post-bachelor computer science program. So these are students who are not traditional computer scientists. They might have a bachelor's in biology or sociology and pursue a second bachelor's in computer science. And I'm teaching there basically that class, and you don't need to code anything in the class. They are actually supposed to work together in teams, which is accurate in terms of the real world scenarios. And they have to do actual research, and it's really challenging to them. And they have to receive and accept feedback on their designs. So they learn like to use prototyping solution, Adobe XD, Figma, InVision, whatever is out there. And then they run like usability studies remotely right now. And then they ask questions, right? What did you like the most about, my app here? What did you like the least? If you could change one thing, What would you change? And then they like iterate the concept. So they run through a little bit of a design process there. They gather requirements. They do some initial discovery research. They create a concept. It might be even on paper. At some point, they go into the digital prototyping solution. And they create this project in a team of 4 students over the term. And it's a challenge once more, because a lot of them are not used to what I have to do research. I'm a programmer. I want to be a programmer. What? I have to talk to people and listen to their opinion. For what? This looks great. There's a start button and there's a little pop-up and it works for me, right? If it works for me, it must work for everyone.
So you're teaching computer scientists the design process so that they understand usability and UX.
I would say it's that's an accurate statement.
Okay. I was going to ask, why do they find research difficult? I guess that explains it.
Well, yeah, it's just there is a general, it's the same in corporate. It was my experience. You might be able to say something to it yourself. There needs to be a certain belief that what I'm doing here is valuable for the product, right? So if in corporate, you can't communicate the value of UX research that 5 out of 5 users said like this checkout process was not good. And say, if we change it now for like whatever, $10,000, we'll save millions down the line because everybody will be able to check out. If you can't communicate that, it's hard to make a case. And it's more or less the same for my students. They need to also learn a little bit initially the value that this initial feedback they receive from their peers, from us, the instructors, as well as through their own reviews. They do guideline reviews against design guidelines and evaluations. This has really simple steps can make a huge difference, basically, right? So that's one class I'm teaching, and I teach another class. It's what a surprise, class in technology ethics, which amongst other things introduce at some point an extra credit assignment about Black Mirror, one of my favorite shows, where students can select a technology depicted in Black Mirror and describe the advantages and disadvantages according to their opinion.
That's an interesting one. Can you tell me more about what the intention is of that? It's
what I was referring to earlier, to create at least a perception of the importance of ethics. Mm-hmm. Yeah. To at least, I know you want to make money, you want to make a career, you want to work at Google, and you want to be successful, and that's all fine. But also, think a little bit more long-term in terms of maybe like what you do, what you create, and how far you are willing to go for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And once more, I'll keep that short, but for example, Black Mirror, any science fiction movie or show, it shows often the dystopian part in Black Mirror, how things could be if, we rely too heavily on technology, or the consequences of social media, etc. It's interesting.
It's that the process that they use for Black Mirror is what I'm putting more thought into, how can I adapt that so that I can use it in my day-to-day work. And I think the process is identifying the variables that matter within a design project or an environment that affects the design project, and then taking those variables and extrapolating them into the future to speculate on where things might lead. And then it's your analysis of this end state that I think will give you a more well-rounded understanding of where you are today. So what I'm looking at doing within my work, I haven't got to this point yet, but I want to try and come up with a framework or a canvas or something that helps you to identify what those variables are, and then perhaps there are a series of ideation sessions where you start to tweak those variables and experiment with them. It would be in a very rapid way because it is within corporate. It would need to be there to inspire thought quickly so that you can move with pace, which you're always encouraged to do. But I'm really interested in seeing if we can bring that in, because there seems to be an awkward relationship where we're asked to innovate all of the time, but be very tactical and don't spend any resources or think too far into the future. And this is where we're stuck. So I'm trying to build a bridge between the two.
Two thoughts on that. And I think your approach is reasonable, and I would at least give this a shot. I want to give you two examples. So the first one is, I was thinking from the other side. You said, like, taking what you have right now, some variables or dimensions or factors, whatever you want to call them, extrapolating them in the future, maybe, the positive scenario, the negative scenario, the third alternative scenario. You could also, in theory, that takes a lot of support, of course, say, we saw this in science fiction, right? The scenario is there, right? I don't know, hoverboards Back into the Future. Marty McFly had the skateboard without wheels, right? My point, you could see how this device would look like, how it would work in the real world. And you could say, this shows you affordances on constraints, right? Mm-hmm. You can actually use the scene to some degree. Of course, you can walk on the set and, have all the angles. But it is it is a video ethnography of the future to some degree, mm-hmm. which, can give you some data. One thought, and another, just, related thought, which popped into my mind when you were introducing your ideas, was there was a paper a couple of years ago. Researchers were interested, about the attitudes of people regarding jobs, future jobs which are actually not even there or existing at the present time. So what they did was, and there was a design fiction, they created fake job ads in newspapers. And I can't recall the names, but it was maybe I don't know, artificial intelligence maintenance technician, or something like that. Robo hotel maintenance worker, and they were outlining some requirements, and they were just curious about the perception of these job ads of the future, to already get feedback on what might to come and what people might think of these, which I think was a neat application of design fiction, a clever application that you use, admittedly some deception, right? But to actually go out there and ask for applications to inform who are these people who think they are qualified for these jobs, and will people even apply?
Yeah, that's very clever. It's like a prototype in a way. Another reason why I wanted to speak to you in particular was because you've spent so much of your career in academia as a researcher and teaching aspects of research. And you, at one point, did transition into corporate and commercial work. What were your experiences transitioning from this world to this world?
I would call it the classical scenario, a long-term academic into a fast-paced corporate technology job. So where I went to, it was actually really fast because it was an agency. So, right, you might know agencies have clients, and the clients hire the agency for work, and they want to be happy. So it was not in-house work, it was all externalized. And the clients we had were the big names, I have to say, from the Silicon Valley, the first ones which come to mind. And my experiences, it was initially, I was motivated, I was enthusiastic, and it had all the bells and whistles of, that shiny corporate job and the office and the gear and the treats. But even though I tried to stress that in my initial interviews, that I was hired as a researcher, basically. The job title was strategist, research and testing. So I was basically doing what I'm teaching my students in my usability engineering class. Design gave me some mock-ups, and I elicited some feedback and gave it back to design. And I was quite quickly disillusioned, because it felt, you never should talk to critical about your prior employer, and they're great people. But I felt like the work I was doing there wasn't valued. It was being done, it was being filed away, but design proceeded with their line of thought regardless, which then made me question my role there and my value there. And yeah, I was trying to voice my concerns. It was a young research team. Imagine there's 300-400 people in this company, and there were 3 researchers. And that's often the case. I hear that in my professional networks and corporate. So, hi, I'm the only user researcher at company X. I'm supposed to create a reops and create a team and just a strategy and everything in the next 20 minutes. I'm looking forward to hear some feedback and guidance. So yeah, I gave this a critical look, and I was able to develop a way out, right? So I developed a secondary opportunity, and I went full-time with my online teaching. And once I had this circled in, I resigned. I would have probably stayed on if I wouldn't have had the secondary opportunity to get out. I would have bit the bullet, so to speak. But I wasn't happy. So that's my personal experience. I think many people, would have been happy with that job and appreciative of, which I was. I just wasn't happy. It is, to answer your question a little bit more, direct. It was extremely quick, way quicker than anything, of course, you have ever done in academia. So I might have gotten, it might happen you get a design in the morning and have to run the study in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. That's fine. And yeah, it's okay to say it was for sure less rigorous than academia. And you have to be very flexible to do these things. Yeah.
I wonder why research is undervalued and underutilized. And I wonder if it's just within the design teams that's the case. Because companies must have researchers and other departments, I would think.
I believe, and I've been told that, is my personal experience, which I had with this company, this agency, which again is a great job. I can't speak badly about them. I just, it wasn't for me, the way it was being handled. I'm sure bigger companies, for example, Facebook or Google, they've become so profitable. They have dedicated UX teams who also have agency, basically, in the company. And yeah, it is a different story if you're a one-person research team, or if you still have to make your case for the company as a whole in terms of viability and contribution to the overall success.
Yeah. So you've come across the concept and idea of lean research, research for agile.
Yeah, sure.
Are you able to reconcile your view of what good research is and being lean?
It's a trade-off. I mean, you had early on this example where you talked about your own experience and you had this breaking point, right? You said something like, we are supposed to speculate into the future and like think ahead what's to come, at the same time maintaining recency. It's this kind of like dilemma, which every researcher, I think, in any kind of setting, in any company, is being placed into at any given time. And I think it's the same with lean or agile research, or like Scrum and like design sprints. Call it what you want. It's more or less all the same. I'll give you one example. Let's say once I worked for a company, and we could not get the user tests with our scheduled respondents done. They were like not available, so to speak, but the project had to be finished. So it was suggested that we test with our own people, that we test with the colleague down the hall. Yeah. I objected to that, but it was done anyways because it needed to be finished. So was that agile? I guess. Was the designers or the other colleagues' inputs, was it actually valuable, or would it have been more valuable to wait another day to talk to everyday people on the street or the target audience? So you have to be careful how lean or how agile you become, because you can deliver research, that's no problem, right? I can deliver any kind of research, but what is it good for?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it's if you know the questions that you need answers to, and you know the risks of getting those answers wrong, and if the business is willing to accept the consequence of getting those answers wrong, then I guess it's on their heads if the people that are committing the resources. But our research said to me recently, sometimes bad research is worse than no research at all. And
I would not argue against that, to be honest. At least you have maybe something, you have some feedback, then none at all. Sure. It's a fine line.
It is. It's tricky, and I'm constantly trying to find ways of being focused with the questions that I'm asking, and even the lead time to get research done. Often while the research is being done, stakeholders are getting agitated because they haven't seen anything in a few weeks, and then that causes pressure as well. So
I mean, my situation was very similar, I would say. There was like times like it was very slow, so to speak, but then like all of a sudden now it's all got to be done within a couple of days. And certainly my experience in academia for a long time didn't help the cause. When I like reflect myself critically, I am sure if I would have been 21 with a bachelor at the time and would have started that job, I wouldn't have, I won't say problems, but I would have adapted easily to it, because that would have been the normal. But for me, this was not really how I thought research, even in the corporate setting, should be done. It was an interest for me. It was at the end an interesting experience I'm thankful for. And funnily enough, I got a lot of, for what's that worth, I don't know, but a lot of props and respect for leaving. Everybody was kind of like, hey, you
can do that.
You don't stick around or what until whatever you are being let go. You're leaving on your own terms, because there's nothing wrong with that.
So as a principled and ethical researcher, knowing the risks of lean and researcher in a corporate environment, what tips would you give to people that are working within that environment?
For the researchers, you mean? Because we talk about teams, right? And in my regards, it was a producer who had the overall responsibility. My problem was that I had no agency, right? So I was not being able to, my concerns were not being heard, which made me eventually, made me leave. So I think every researcher in a corporate setting at some point will face a hard truth, which is that for the sake of, the project or the client or the remaining time or the cost you have to make compromises and sacrifices. And there will be a point in time, likely, where you question yourself, how far am I willing to go? Let's say, for example, let's make a hypothetical example. Let's say you have done the research and you were on budget, on time, you did the slide deck and the report, and it's ready to go out. It's good, it's legit. But let's say your manager looks over it just before and says, hey, this is good work and this is honest, but we can't show this. This is just, these quotes or these statements. I know they said this, but we can't. Let's just take out slide 2 and 3 with the critical stuff and leave slide 4 and 5 with the positive stuff inside. I'm not saying that happened, but what do? You have to ask yourself that question. I don't have your answer, or anybody's. Yeah, are you willing to accept this or not? That's probably going to happen. So I guess I would suggest play out some scenarios in your own head, to a design fiction in your own head, so to speak, and then try to look hardly at yourself and how will you handle that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have handled it differently if I wouldn't have had a way out. So it was relatively easy for me. I couldn't change it at the company, so I changed my own situation. Many people probably have to stick with it, and then flexibility is key, communication is key, knowing some people in the C-suite who maybe have your back. If somebody talks into your work, your research, and kind of trying to maybe, sugarcoat it, so to speak.
Yeah. I think you got to, like I said, know which questions you need answers to, know how far you're willing to bend when it comes to getting those answers and what resources you use. And you are going to come up with times where you decide whether or not you can compromise on the work that you're doing. But for me personally, it's a journey of just trying to constantly improve under pressure and just find ways. I believe there are ways to get this stuff done, but it's the role of being an advocate constantly and educating people constantly. It can be quite grueling.
It's a huge difference, I believe, if there is a company-wide understanding of the value, let's say, of, lean, fast, but proper and independent research, for example. It doesn't have to, take forever all the time, or it doesn't have to, be super perfect and great long reports and whatsoever. But at least it has to have autonomy, because that's the point of it. And it has to know that it has some agency too.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's a nice thought. It needs to be autonomous. It needs to be independent. It needs to be unbiased. And I guess as long as you can hold true to that, then the research that you're doing will have some value and you can rely on it.
So that's the end of the recording. We thought that was a nice thought to finish up on. I'd like to give a big thanks to Phil for working with me on this episode. I enjoyed the whole process and it was great meeting him. Phil has kindly supplied a list of links to the projects and articles that he referenced throughout the recording, so I'll put those into the description so you can take a look. Hope you enjoyed the first episode of Design of Things and found some useful ideas in there. So thanks for listening and catch you next time.